I'm going to introduce you. Okay, I just want to say thank you for all of you for being here. We're going to start, we've started our live stream, and we're now going to have our first speaker, Yifa Segal. I'm going to introduce her, and then we'll start off with this part of the event. So Yifa has a BA in law from the University of Haifa and an MA in international relations from the University of Tel Aviv. In the years 2013 to 2014, she was the joint director of Tzapit Press Service. She was also director of International Legal Forum, and most recently, she was the chief of staff to the Israeli ambassador of the United States. She will be talking about the delegitimization against Israel, the rise of anti-Semitism, and what we can do about it. Please.
How long do I have? 20, 30 minutes. Okay. Shut me up whenever you want. Okay. So this is weird. I think this is a subject that we can spend hours talking about. So I just chose a few things that I think are critical for people today that are active, fighting against anti-Semitism, trying to understand it, trying to engage, with others, whether in Israel, but most importantly in the international arena about this issue. And I also think there's a lot of misunderstandings. There are a lot of this is an issue. Saying anti-Semitism now is something that I think, we as a group, as Jewish people, we can't agree exactly on what it is, which acts can or cannot be considered anti-Semitic and stuff like that. That is making us, divided as well. We don't need excuses to be divided, but I think this is something that we need to really thoroughly kind of understand and think about and come to as a broad agreement or understanding as much as we can, because I think this phenomena is growing. So I'll just give you some thoughts that I have had about this and the ways that I chose to deal with it. Okay. So first of all, it's not entirely clear to us today, what it means to be anti-Semitic. I mean, we can tell now, looking in retrospect, that if there was a day when someone said, well, because you're a Jew, you are the, what did I do? Okay. You worship the wrong God, or, you're responsible for killing Christ and you're adversary of the devil, or that you're a Jew, therefore, racially, in terms of your DNA, you're just corrupt or evil, or some kind of a disease on humankind, then we can spot that. Today we can spot that. It's very easy to spot that today and say that's anti-Semitic. But we need to understand kind of how, the human mind or the psychology behind, the movements of people, to understand how that came to be. Because what we need to understand is that most people are not, they don't wake up in the morning and they say, I know I'm a bad person. I've decided to go and prosecute this group of people because they're weak, because I can, because I need some outlet for my rage. And therefore, I'll just go and be violent against them, whether rhetorically or physically, and I'll be happy. Most people don't say that. I don't know, maybe, psychopaths have that, way of thinking. And we have to ask a psychologist. Maybe they wake up in the morning, I have to find a victim today. I'm going to beat the shit out of them. I'll be very happy. But most people don't do that. They have a very good rationale behind their activism, behind their hatred, and even behind their violence. I mean, if you look at the world today or throughout history, you had millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people that are hateful and violent. Trust me, they don't wake up in the morning and say, I know I'm bad and I love it. That's not what they say. They have a very good, reason they tell themselves, or they were told. to why they have to do what they do, even if sometimes it's uncomfortable. They know it's uncomfortable, but that's what they have to do. Okay, so if you look at the time in history where religion was really the focus of society, right? Then to get people to to decide to act against the Jews as a collective, you had to tell these type of stories. So you tell people you have to act against the people who conspired against Christ, because they got Christ to be crucified. Tomorrow will be you, and they're acting against God, and they will infect your youth and your women and your men and your whatever, and you have to act and preempt that. And they poisoning the wells today, just like they did in the old days, etc. So you feel as that you have to defend yourself, and you're convinced, that this is the way to do it, and that was how they got people to be anti-Semitic or anti-Jews at the time. Same goes with racist or nationalistic type of motivations or narratives. Okay, if you don't stop the Jews are conspiring. I mean, look at you, you're poor, or you lost the war in Germany, or look at everything that goes on around. Look at the coronavirus. Okay, and those Jews once again conspired to kill us and to take our money and to drink our blood, and there's some kind of a secret society, whatever, that is very active throughout the ages in doing that. And so you are convinced that there's some kind of greater evil, even if the Jews look like a nice, they look nice, but that's a part of the conspiracy. Okay? So that's what gets most people to kind of join these hateful types of movements, even though it, for someone like me, I sit and I'm like, this looks like a perfectly reasonable human being, what happened? And this brings me to the issue of today. So today it is about religion and it is about race, but in the mainstream of the liberal kind of democratic world, that's not the dominant kind of factor in society today. And what do we have? What took place? What replaced old values? The new thing is human rights, which is amazing. Amazing. The world now, I think, at least in our democratic liberal society, is in a much better place than it ever was before, in that sense. But the problem with that is that it's also can be manipulated, definitely can be manipulated, as we can see. And the second thing is that every good thing also has its kind of form of extreme. Okay, even love has a form of extreme, right? You have jealousy, we know what that feels like. We understand how things can come and take an extreme form. And again, I say things are open to manipulation, especially when it's this new and it's this powerful. And we see people going off the deep end sometimes when they talk about these values that are so important to them. So let's try to understand the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish kind of activism or supportive world, okay? So I see it as like constructed of three layers or tiers of activism or belief. So if we look at the anti-Israel world, you have the people that they know. They wake up in the morning and they've decided back in 2001, there was a Durban conference. Need me to explain what that is, or everyone knows what I'm talking about? Explain? Okay, 2001, the United Nations, there was a conference called the Durban Conference. It took place in South Africa, deliberately in South Africa, to talk about the apartheid of South Africa. And this was a United Nations event, and the world was invited to talk about anti-racism and anti-apartheid and the whole thing. Of course, Israel had a delegations, Jewish organizations, Zionist Jewish organizations had delegations. They went to Durban. Just shockingly, I mean, no one thought that this would be like a pro-Israel event because it's a United Nations event. But no one, the people, the delegations had no idea, what they're going to go into. It was a hate fest to an extent none of them ever imagined possible, and they completely hijacked the entire conference just to kind of create that equivalent of Israel equals apartheid. Israel today equals South Africa of apartheid years. And it was successful beyond belief. I mean, if you think about the BDS movement and everything that we know today is a problem that we need to face, everything took root in that conference, in the Durban conference. I call it like the trial run of the new kind of boycott movement, to kind of couple the human rights narrative with the anti-Israel narrative, and it was so successful that they understood this is probably the best and the smartest way to go forward, because hey, look at all these people. All of a sudden, they're also very passionate about our cause. So when I talk about the first layer, the first tier, the inner circle of BDS or anti-Israel movement, I'm talking about these people. They know what they're doing. This is something that was brilliantly thought of by someone, by a group of people. They thought, we're going to hijack the concept of apartheid. We're going to put this in this context. We're going to have this conference, There's a group of people, even today, that they're very active in the world of BDS or anti-Israel activism, that they know exactly what they're doing. They do the manipulation of the films and the videos and the narratives, and they tell all these lies about poisoning wells and taking homes, and the Sheikh Jarrah story, for example. Someone thought that this might be a real estate dispute, that aged back like 150 years, but maybe if we just kind of, change the details a little bit, we can turn this into a major campaign to be an anti-Israeli campaign. Someone orchestrated this thing, right? So this is the first group of people, the inner circle of the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic activism. The second layer are the people that are anti-Semitic. Okay, they don't care about necessarily anti-Israel, not anti-Israel. They don't care about human rights in Jerusalem or in the territories or in Gaza or wherever. They don't care at all about human rights. But this was a cause for celebration. Here's a movement, that's targeting the Jews and targeting the Jewish state, and of course we hate them for religious reasons or racist reasons or whatever. And here's an opportunity to just join the party because it's such a successful party. So we want in. So this is kind of, and there's a lot of them. I mean, if you look at like the neo-Nazi organizations in the United States, for example, what do they care there as a state of Israel? I mean, it's quite the opposite. If you don't want the Jews gone from the United States, send everyone to Israel. But it's such an opportunity for them to kind of express and publicly support and join a movement of hatred that they just join a party. And of course, the Islamic groups and the different Muslim groups, etc., that radical Islamic groups. So now it brings me, the reason I'm telling you all of this is that I want to talk to you about the third group of people that today, I don't know, but I think they're getting to be the biggest group of people. I don't know if that's true, but I definitely know that they are the most influential and the most important group of people that we need to address. And that's the third cycle, okay? And what do I mean by that? And I've always said that if we, at the end of the day, remain with the jihadists and the anti-Semites, we're good. We're good. What the biggest problem that we had are those people that, for so many years, and let me ask you something. If you had, lived somewhere else, and someone had, talked to you for years and years and years about this country far away, and all you've heard about it is that they're colonialists, evil oppressors, they kill babies, they steal this, they take that, all the time, and not just from random people in the street. You hear it from the biggest, newspaper in the country, and you hear it on college campuses, and you hear it from celebrities that you value and appreciate, and basically everywhere you go, that you hear an opinion from someone that matters to you to some extent. That's what they say. Okay, what would you think, really? And you are a true, liberal, at least Democrat. And you really believe in human rights, and you really can't tolerate the thought of this group of people that just all day, every day, all they do is steal and rape and kill. It's unbearable. And there's this huge global movement. Which side are you going to be on? I mean, just imagine yourselves, okay? And unfortunately, no, they don't have access to anyone telling them otherwise. They don't know the history. They don't bother to study the history. And that's not just an anti-Israel problem. It's just a problem that we have, with the human race. People don't have the time and the energy and the focus to really learn every little thing and base your own opinion. So kind of going against the currents. So I just want you to, the reason I'm telling you all this is that when you deal now with a lot of these people that have joined the movement, the BDS movement or the anti-Israel movement, that are active or vocal against Israel, a lot of these people, this is where they come from. It's real. They have real intentions. They have good intentions, and it's real. And this is the information that poisoned their hearts and minds for many, many, many years. And this is where they end up. Okay? And I think it's very, very important for us to understand that, because when we use the term anti-Semitic, this is anti-Semitic. We need to understand, we need to choose our words very carefully and understand what we're saying. Exactly, okay? Because I don't think, let's talk about Ben and Jerry's. This is one of the things that really I found it to be infuriating, and I was active, I'm still active, will be active until the day that they will come and say, on their knees and say, we take it back, like I did with Airbnb. But I don't, first of all, these two men are Jews, so that's kind of a problem, calling them anti-Semitic. And I don't really believe that, they set like Ben and Jerry said like that, and we're like, let's destroy the Jewish state because we hate them, just because. This is they fell into, they basically took the red pill, the blue pill, which one was that in the movie? And that's, they've been spiraling ever since, and they're not the only ones. But can we say now that it's not anti-Semitic to single out the one country in the world, and their products can be found in, I checked, you can find their products in every place on earth, okay? They've never came out with a statement saying, we will not allow our products to be sold at this and that. Only Israel. Okay? So is this not anti-Semitic? I mean, this is the very definition of anti-Semitic. But what I'm trying to say is that when we tackle this, I call it, I'm a lawyer and my background is in international law, and I say, you can aid and abet anti-Semitism. And that offense does not require intent. You don't necessarily have to have like the intent of being anti-Semitic, but there's a movement here that is anti-Semitic, and you are negligent at best, by aiding and abetting a movement that their actions are anti-Semitic. Its purpose is anti-Semitic. You haven't looked into it. You haven't, thoroughly looked into it. Basically, at best, you're negligent and you're aiding and abetting anti-Semitism. That's what you're doing. That is de facto what is going on, okay? If a drunk driver, goes into his car and hits a little boy and kills it, okay? And of course, he didn't intend, it's the worst nightmare for him in the world, that he just hurt a little boy. But it doesn't change the fact that that's what he did. So he was negligent, or whatever you want to call it, but the result is the same result. And that, when we talk about, people like Ben and Jerry's, of course, there are a million examples, the people that contribute to Human Rights Watch, for example. I don't know if you follow all these reports, by these organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. I mean, you name it, there are so many organizations that if you look back and you say, I mean, come on, you people have done so much good for so many decades around the world, and there's just literally one issue that you don't even bother study thoroughly. And this is what you're doing. I mean, you're a global organization with such credibility that your words matter. And what you're doing, de facto, is that you are contributing to the delegitimization of my very existence, really. Okay? So we are, again, at a time that, let me tell you something. I just came back from Washington, and in the summer, I think it was July maybe, there was a demonstration outside Congress, to kind of raise awareness to fight against anti-Semitism. So I went to the demonstration, and I've been to these types of events many times. I spoke at these events, I participated in these events, I organized these events. This was the first time that I came to one of these events as a Jew living in the United States, because I was born and raised in Israel, traveled around the world my entire, career, never lived abroad. So I came to that demonstration, and I can't even explain to you. I mean, I don't know, some of you, most of you maybe have lived or were born in the United States or somewhere else and came to Israel. So you probably maybe know that experience from, alternatively. But I was appalled. I can't even, like, all of a sudden I understood that we're standing there begging, of any foreign parliament, any group of majority of the majority, to allow us to exist. We have a right to fight for our very existence. We don't want anything. We're not asking for, more money, more this, more that, just to exist. The fact that there's anti-Semitism in the United States today is wrong. That's what it was about. And there's still a need for thousands of Jews to come and stand outside Congress to say that. So today, even though we have our sovereignty, and I can tell you that I have a newly found appreciation. I've always appreciated that. I was very lucky to be born in Israel. Never had to deal with the fact that I'm a part of the minority. Now we're a majority. That comes with responsibility. But when you have the responsibility, then you can choose what to do with it. And so, I think all of us as activists are always trying to improve, the way that we are responsible as the majority. But we're not the minority, which is amazing if you think about it, because my very existence does not rely on the good graces of any other group, okay? But now when you look at the international arena, and I think now more than ever that, the world is a global village in a way, and our existence, to an extent, does rely on the permission of other nations. Their permission for our existence, their permission for our survival. And I think the more the world becomes that way, the more there was a type of awakening within activists like ourselves to say, this is not an arena, this is not a fight that we can neglect anymore. Because we have to make sure that we kind of secure our own survival in that international arena, and that's when it matters, because these groups are unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if you ever follow these groups. They're everywhere. They're in every parliament in the world, lobbying against the existence of the state of Israel. Okay, when you talk to people that are BDS activists, what you find yourself do is defend the very existence of your Jewish state. That's what you're doing. And we're not arguing a policy. Okay, that's great. That's fine. I don't mind that. But that's what we're doing. And I've never encountered any other situation, a conversation about any other country or any other group, that's what they need to do. Stand up there and say, I'm here to defend my very existence. And I want to share one last thing with you that I found to be very helpful. And that, people can be religious or non-religious. They can come, they can be scientists or not scientists or whatever and wherever they come from. And so I don't go into arguments with them about theology or history or archaeology or anything like that. What I found to be very useful is to say, in a world when we all believe in the right to self-determination, then you don't have to believe in the Jewish Bible. Like, Jews believe in the Jewish Bible, at least religious Jews believe in the Jewish Bible. There's no requirement for a Christian or for a secular person in Italy to believe in the Jewish Bible like the Jews believe in the Jewish Bible. There's also no need for whoever to believe in the archaeological findings or the history of the Jews exactly as we tell it. You don't have to believe that exactly. No one has to follow exactly our story and our narrative. But there's one thing that really strikes me as unbelievable, and that is the fact that they don't see one thing, that we, the Jews, have been telling this story consistently for thousands of years. That is all you need to understand now if you are a true believer in the right of self-determination. This is my story. This is the way I've been telling it, not just me, but my mother and my grandmother and her grandmother before her, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for hundreds of generations, for thousands of years. So you cannot tell me that you really are a human rights activist and you really are a person that is one of the most important things to you in the world is the right of self-determination, when you don't respect even that basic fact that we, the Jews, are here in the land of Israel, because this is the story of our people for thousands of years. And I have to tell you, I couldn't find any one of them that had a real comeback to that. Anyway, there's a lot to say. I'll stop here. You guys want questions or no? Okay. What, to that? The thing I found about, when people get lost in conversation, so they kind of go back to their original argument and raise the volume. And then they go back and raise the volume, go back, raise the volume. Now, the way to have an argument, I found, first of all, I don't waste time talking to stupid people individually. It's a waste of time. No, really, honestly, like, you can't convince everybody. There's no chance in hell. If you sit me down with Rashida Tlaib, I'm not gonna, why? I mean, let's go have, nap. That's a bit better use of my time, But what matters is the people that are sitting around you. Those people matter, okay? And so if you find yourself debating someone like that, even someone extreme, I mean, if there's an audience around you, there's a group of people around you, especially if there's, I've been debating people on public stages or bigger crowds, they matter. So all you have to do in that context is just, keep cool, let them, circle around themselves, raise the volume. Now, what you see when you sit in the outside is a person like me saying, I'm not trying to force you into thinking like me or believing my story or being with me every step of the way. All I'm asking you for you to do is respect my traditions and heritage. That's all I'm asking. And then they see the other person going completely mental, just going crazy and crazy and crazy. Then you win a lot of people in the audience. Yeah.
So you mentioned the Rabbi in July.
I think it was July.
I think
Yeah.
that was led the day after I think it was led by and also young college students. So I think those are special students who have that fire and that drive to speak up against anti-Semitism and anti-Israel work in the United States. So what do you say? How do you motivate students who are apathetic and Jews in the United States who tend to side with Ben and Jerry? I would just say maybe they self-induce. How do you
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's a process, and also I understand them. I have a lot of empathy for them. I can only imagine, when you're a college student, you're 18 or you're 19 or 20, and all of a sudden you realize that you're siding. I mean, the side that you're siding with is the most unpopular thing on planet Earth. And that has real ramifications. First of all, I mean, you're a young man or woman, and you just want to hang out or date this cool person, whatever, and you're in the wrong camp of not just the wrong camp. You're viewed as the devil itself because you are supportive of the devil itself. So that's a real challenge. And I think what we need to do is, first of all, kind of have a lot of empathy. I think the scariest thing for me in the world is the divide between us. That's the scariest thing. And the divide comes from not understanding, from not having an empathy. So I think what we need to do is not be angry at these people and not try to fight these people. Just try to feed them information and give them the safe space to, in time, want to read more, want to ask questions, want to be closer and closer to you because they have an opening. The door is open for you to come back to us. The door is open for you to ask questions. The door is open for you to have hard questions or critical questions or criticism. The door is open. Let's have a conversation. I understand where you're coming from. And if it takes you a day or a year or 10 years, the door is open for you to come back. And so when you give the people the, kind of an opening to just question a little bit, just have, not be so 100% sure they have the right, they're siding with the right team, then, most people with time, at least they would start questioning, they would start a conversation. I think that's the safest, best bet we have. And just understand it's not going to be tomorrow. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That's a very, that's a very good question because yes and no. I mean, it depends on which issue. If you're looking for, Jewish history, or you're looking at, the Israeli current history, you're looking for information about, the War of Independence, or it depends on which issue, and you're right. I mean, sometimes it's very hard to find, and you need to have someone who will recommend specifically on something that is interesting to you. It's a lot harder, unfortunately, than it sounds. But I do invite you, if you want to read, more about any one of these topics. Contact me. Any one of the organizations usually have some kind of a list of recommendations. I'm happy to recommend. There are books that I feel have given me so much, ammunition in these battles, that I think are invaluable. Everyone has a book that they think is invaluable. So anyone who would like to ask for recommendations for me, I guess you guys also, please do that. It's very important. Thank you. All right. Toda raba.
All right. So our next speaker is going to be here in a little bit. We have a short 5-minute speech, though, coming from someone who I work with at my department. He'll be here in like 4 minutes, something like that. So for now, we've put out the lunch. So start. When he comes, we'll sit back down, and then we'll go on from there. So the lunch is in the back. And those on our live stream, come back in like 20 minutes.
But it doesn't really go into the later on. But it needs to be really strong from the whole world culture. So what's the sense of the thing? How are you? Who is this? So this is actually
All right, so we're gonna start in like 4 minutes. Are we missing anyone? The fact that it's mostly friends and family makes it a lot easier, except for our live stream, who I don't know is on that. Ozzy, are we missing anyone? Perfect. Cool. So our next guest speaker is the person who I'm currently her intern. I'm doing an internship at the Fighting Anti-Semitism and Enhancing Resilience Department, and I was supposed to be there today, but I'm here. So please, Naomi.
So Moshe, because you invited me here, you don't get points off for not being in the office. My name is Naomi Middleman-Cohen. I'm the International Project Manager at the Department for Combating Anti-Semitism and Enhancing Resilience. So I'd just like to give you an overview of what our department actually does. Can you hear me okay? No. Can you hear me better now? Amazing. Okay, so our department, I would say, we can distribute it into three pillars of what we actually do. One is data collection and monitoring. We collect data from all around the world of anti-Semitic incidences. So it's really all over the world, all continents, every single day. We have somebody that works for us, and we get WhatsApps. I always think of, a bit lehavdil of the application of the app Tseva Adom when rockets fly to Israel. So that's the same thing of how I feel when I get all these updates on WhatsApp, because it's really crazy how much is happening all around the world that we don't even know about. So that's one thing that we do. We feel that it's very important to know what is happening in the world, what types of anti-Semitic incidences there are, because there are a lot of different ones. And this way we'll also know what to focus on and which communities to help, what type of anti-Semitism to focus on, etc. The second pillar, I would say, is training and education. We believe, especially among youth and students, that it's important to know what anti-Semitism is so that they're empowered to combat it. Because a lot of them, including myself, I have a few years' experience, you kind of know what anti-Semitism is, but there's always this fine line. Is this anti-Semitic? Isn't it anti-Semitic? So there are a lot of definitions that help you define and be very clear about what is anti-Semitism. So it's important for us to educate and train young people. Next year, we're going to start a project where we're going to focus mainly on online anti-Semitism, which has been a growing problem, especially during Corona. And we're going to train youth and students from all around the world how to monitor anti-Semitism, how to even understand what anti-Semitism that is, and then also how to create counter narratives, because just reporting something you saw on TikTok, first of all, is probably not going to be removed, and second of all, that's only part of how to combat anti-Semitism, in our opinion. The third pillar is support. Our department is called the Department for Combating Anti-Semitism and Enhancing Resilience. So this is the resilience part. We believe that a Jewish community needs to be strong in the face of anti-Semitism, but just in general in order to prosper. So what we would like to do and what we are doing is we're helping Jewish communities strengthen their Jewish identity, whether it's the religious Jewish identity, cultural Jewish identity. Connectivity between Jewish communities is very important, because if you have a large network and support, then you can combat anti-Semitism and in general be more resilient in a much stronger way. One recent example, so what I didn't mention is also security. Resilience also has to do with security and raising awareness. So recently, the Jewish community in France came to us, and they said that they're really scared for their children and their youth, because there are a lot of dangerous people and things out there that the kids don't know how to deal with. And this now I'm talking about more of a security kind of line. So what they wanted us to produce from them is an educational video. So we produced an animated video in French. It came out then also in English and in Spanish, where basically you have a teenager on his phone walking his dog, and then they're waiting to cross the light. The light is red, and next to them is a suspicious man in an overly sized coat, even though it's summertime, and there's a bag next to him. So the dog is kind of alerting the teenager on the phone, there's something, we need to do something about it. Anyways, so that's basically the premise. So basically this video teaches you to always be aware of your surroundings, and also tells you what you need to do. You need to be aware, you need to be alert, you need to go and report it if you can. So something like that. So that's a video that the community came directly to us. They asked for help, and we were happy to provide that. So basically, those are the three pillars. It's very important for us to always be in touch with the Jewish communities around the world, hear what their needs are, what they would like from us, instead of coming to them and say, we think that you need X, Y, Z. And that's basically what our department is doing. If you have any questions. All right, thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Rabbi Uri Pilichowski. In 2014, he moved to Israel, and he became involved in Yeshivat HaKotel in Jerusalem. He used to teach in the Hillel Community Day School. His life has been devoted to education and teaching. He is currently the CEO of the Israel Education Supply, and he is the author of 3 books, a book on time management, on the Parsha, and on the Jewish festivals. Today he'll be talking to us about what is Zionism and how to stand up for your Jewish identity. Rabbi Uri Pilichowski.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see some familiar faces. Schwarzberg. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very impressed with with Ozzy and everybody that put this event together. I'm hoping this is one of many great events. I just introduced myself. That was a great introduction, and my mother would have been very proud. But just to fill you, I actually work for Nefesh B'Nefesh. And we opened up a new office on Monday, and the new campus is designed as an educational center, not just an Aliyah center. And I'm a senior educator at Nefesh B'Nefesh, and we educate about Zionism. And some of those things is what I want to talk about. So if you're watching or you're here because you care about Zionism. That's why you're in the room, and that's already a big step. You're the cream of the crop. There are very few people that think about Zionism, that talk about Zionism, that feel that they're Zionists. I guess being in this building You can't really ignore the Zionism sort of imbued in you, and it's great to recognize your leadership and to welcome it. So I feel that I'm among many people that are much greater than I am in this room, and I feel kind of somewhat inadequate talking to you, but I'm hoping that there's something I could lend to you. Last week I was actually, you mentioned that I taught at Sheck Hillel in Miami. I still do teach there. I teach there on Zoom. And last week I had a chance to visit the campus. I went there in person. And what was amazing to me is I went to Miami for one day. So I had my responsibilities I had to do, which was taking students around South Florida on a learning and lobbying mission. But then I had other responsibilities, familial responsibilities, which entail going to Target and Costco. And that's for my wife, and making sure that I picked up all the stuff that needs to be picked up. And when I was there, I was somewhat demoralized and depressed because everywhere I went in South Florida, I heard Hebrew, which used to be a great thing when I lived in South Florida. To hear Hebrew everywhere, it was like a great feeling. But then standing in South Florida, hearing, not just seeing Jews, but hearing actual Hebrew being spoken, that wasn't a welcome feeling. And as I was walking the aisleways of Target and hearing in almost every single aisle more Hebrew being spoken, and recognizing that these were not tourists, these were not Israelis there on tourists, but these are people that lived in South Florida, and almost every single waiter at every restaurant that I went to spoke to me in Hebrew, and which doesn't happen here. Ironically, right? When I'm here, they speak to me in English. And so it harkened back to something that I've always had a problem with, and I'm going to start talking about it and then come back to it, which is the famous song, Ein li eretz acheret, right? I have no other land. And it's understood by most Israelis as something of pride, right? Ein li eretz acheret, this is my land, right? I have no other land. I'm proud of this land. But I also think there's a sense of almost less than ideal to it. In halacha, we'd call it b'di'evet. It's after, I'm here because ein li eretz acheret. I have no other land to go to. That's why I'm here. If I had another land, then I'd definitely go there. And that's the first time I heard ein li eretz acheret, I heard, the cynical, pessimistic person I am, I didn't see it in the positive light. I saw it in more of I have to be here because ein li eretz acheret. When I first moved to Israel, so I live in a place called Mitzpeh Yericho, which is not the center of Anglo life that, let's say, Modi'in, or Ra'anana, and Beit Shemesh are. And so when I got there, my neighbors were very enthused to see an American make Aliyah and come to Mitzpeh Yericho, and they didn't see too many Olim at that point. Now, thank God, it's become more popular. Our mayor is even, our Yoshev Rosh is even an American, and people were gracious and told me how great it was that I had moved to Israel, and how wonderful Aliyah is, and how they can't believe I would leave America, and how great America is, and I would come. And then somebody said to me something that was like you have those comments that people make offhand that are like a stab in the heart. And they said to me, it's great that you came, but you'll never really be one of us. And I was like, wow, okay, why? And they said, because you have an American passport. And if things get really bad, you can leave. You can go somewhere else. We're stuck. We have nowhere to go. And that really hurt, because making Aliyah was a very for me was a very meaningful and significant move in my life, where I was saying, no, this is my land, this is my place. So I don't want to go. I don't want to go somewhere else. And just because I have an American passport doesn't mean that I'm ever planning. I don't keep it so that there's a place that I can go to. It just happens to be that's where I was born. So yeah, I guess in a way I do have a place I could go to, but if it ever happened that I would have an emergency situation, I don't know if I would use my American passport to escape this land. This is my home. This is my land. It's my home just as much as anybody else's. And home is your home. We came on Nefesh B'Nefesh's 50th flight, which should have been like a huge tekes and everything, and a very large ceremony, but it wasn't. It was before Corona, the only flight that didn't have one of those big ceremonies, because we came during Tzokei time. And during that summer, so because of weird other situations, the media had gotten a hold of me You can look at the fill-in story is what got me in the eyes of the media. And then, so then they already had a person that was moving to Israel during the midst of a war. And we were doing about 7 media interviews a day about this from outlets all around the country. And somebody was interviewing us as our lift was being taken, like as the movers were. In the background, you see men carrying off boxes and the TV stations there. And they said, you're moving during a time of war. Why would you do this? And I said, because it's home. And you're always safest at home. Even if your home's attacked, you're always safest at home. So you always want to go home. And that's what Eretz Yisrael meant to me. It was home. Israelis have lived, and when I say Israelis, I'm not differentiating between American Olim and Israelis, but I'm saying we as a people, Israelis, have lived against threats over and over in 48 and 67 and 73 and 82, and intifadas of 87 and 2001, Scuds during the Persian Gulf War, Lebanon in the Second War in 2006, 6 now heavy flare-ups in Gaza, suicide bombings, school shootings, and a nuclear threat by now 3 different countries, 2 of which we've taken care of and 1 we're on the way. And yet, through all of that, including this morning, we have never seen a major fleeing of Israelis. We've stuck it out. We've stuck it through. We've always said that this is home, and no matter who's going to attack us, no matter what they're going to do, we're going to stay here. This is home. We're going to stick it out. We're not going anywhere else. And that's a tremendous thing. And I have a close friend who I adore and think that he's one of the greatest thinkers in Israel. He's a writer for the Times of Israel named Chaviv Redigur. And he has a theory about what the Palestinians are getting wrong about us. The Palestinians are told that we are colonialists. And they're told that, like all colonialists, eventually we will leave. Eventually, this is because we have it's a place we are temporarily, where eventually when things get bad enough, like all colonialists throughout history, we will go somewhere else. Where this will not be the place that we will stay. So all they have to do is keep trying to move us out, and eventually we will move out. Eventually we will be sent somewhere else, and we'll leave. So all they have to do is keep making it bad enough for us, and eventually we'll leave. But what they don't understand, and this is Chaviv's point, is that Ein li eretz acheret. There is no other place to go. Israelis don't have a place that we could go. Sure, I could take my American passport and I could go, and many people in this room could leave, and many Israelis could leave. But the general populace, most Israelis, would not have a place to go. So since we have no place to go, it doesn't make a difference how bad they make it for us. We're still just going to stay. So this idea that they've been indoctrinated with and told that if they just keep resisting enough, we'll leave is actually false. We won't leave because we can't. Ein li eretz acheret. Which brings me to a point which is not going to be the point of my talk, but is a point which is the United States Free Waiver Program. So for years I've lobbied, and not about this, but I've lobbied members of Congress and members of the Senate and taken my students into the White House to lobby. And every once in a while, a member of Congress will bring up this free waiver program. For those that don't know, Israelis in the room definitely know, but Americans never really understand this. We just go by our embassy here and see long lines and never understand what they're for. But if you're Israeli and you want to go visit the United States, it's not easy. You have to apply for an appointment. And then if you get an appointment, which today takes about a year to get, you then have to wait online for an interview for a visa. And if a State Department foreign officer interviews you and sees that they think that, okay, you're not going to be somebody that's going to overstay their visa, they will grant you a visa. But to get that interview, you, number one, have to be accepted for the interview and then wait all day long outside of the embassy online. It's a very arduous process, which is why so many Israelis, when they go on vacation, don't go to the United States. They go to Southeast Asia, they go to different places, rather than the United States, because it's so hard. And a lot of, when this is brought up in front of my students, in front of other people, people just assume that the reason why it's so hard for an Israeli to get a visa to America is because the State Department has always been historically pro-Arab. It's always been anti-Semitic, and the feeling among the State Department is going to be, well, we shouldn't let the Jews come in, right? That's the idea. So we've got to limit it, and then we're going to make it very hard, and that's actually not true. I've spoken to many Jewish members of Congress, and the problem is something that we're all familiar with, which is if you go to any mall in the United States, so what are you going to be faced with as you walk through the mall? You're going to be faced with the Israeli who's overstayed their visa, is trying to make their fortune selling you Dead Sea salt products. And if you just try this lotion, so every State Department official goes to the mall on Saturday and they go shopping, and they're inundated with these Israelis attacking them. And then on Monday they sit down and try to figure out, should we allow them to participate in the free waiver program where Israelis won't need a visa to get into America? And then the answer always is, we're crazy if we would ever grant them this visa, because then we'll just have every single kiosk and every single mall and every single street inundated by Israelis, and we can't allow that to happen. So Americans have always feared, the American government has always feared, that Israelis will inundate them and overstay their visa. And that's a legitimate fear. That's something when American Congress people have asked me, do you think that's really something to fear, that Israelis will leave en masse? My answer is yes. I really do think that could be a problem. And that really speaks, and this is the point of why I bring all this up, it really speaks to the work that we need to do. I'm not blaming anybody beforehand or looking at Israeli society in a critical way, but I think we, the people in this room, and the people watching, have a lot of work to do, which is we need to re-inspire Jewish Israelis, whether they're born here or they moved here, to be more Zionistic. I don't think that we're as Zionistic as we think we are. And we have to be Zionistic to the point where we're willing to sacrifice in order to stand up for our Zionism. We need to be here, and we need to have a sense of inspiration about our Zionism. That's crucial. It's not a joking matter. Entire nations and empires have fallen because people aren't as inspired to stay, just to stay, even when things get tough, when housing prices are too much. If you'll permit me to read, just for one small moment, a quote from Abraham Lincoln, which he says as follows: "At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring up amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of freemen, we must live through all time or die by suicide." Lincoln is referring, obviously, to the United States of America. This is often misquoted as the following quote: "America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we lose our freedoms, it will be because we have destroyed ourselves from within." And I think that doesn't just apply to Abraham Lincoln. It applies to us here in Israel. Lincoln is talking about America, a great nation that's built on great ideals, and Israel is just as great of a nation built on just as great ideals. And that's what we have to worry about. We've stuck up against enemies. We've made sure that intifadas and wars have not broken us and have ensured that we stayed. And as much Hebrew as you hear in Florida, there's more Hebrew here spoken. Most of us have stayed. The great overwhelming majority have stayed, and more have come. This dream has grown and grown and grown. And that's something that's incredibly important. And we risk, if we're not constantly inspiring ourselves in our Zionism, we risk losing that. At home and in school, our core message must be to teach our children about the importance of the land of Israel, about nationhood, about Zionism. Most importantly, we have to instill a sense of pride in who we are as Israelis. The combination of love and pride will keep our people in the land. All too often, and I think this is really important for a conference like this, we've replaced Zionism with pro-Israel reactionary activism, I'll call it. We've said that instead of being Zionists, we have to be pro-Israel. We've lost that sense of Zionism, but the meat of the matter is Zionism. That's what we're all about. We're about Zionism. We're not about being pro-Israel. We're about being Zionism. We're not about worrying about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and what they're saying. We're not worried about Jewish Voices for Peace and their next absurd event that they have, and if not now's latest post. We play defense against Palestinian provocateurs, but we're forgetting the pride in who we are and what we stand for. We stand for a free Jewish people with self-determination in our own land. We stand for a strong Jewish people able to thrive, grow, and strengthen itself. We are Zionists, and we should be proud. Zionism isn't a dirty word. Zionism isn't something to be ashamed of. It's not something that we need to explain. Zionism is something that we need to be proud of, and it's a dream that we need to keep dreaming. All too often, and notice it among yourselves in your social media posts, in your speeches, and in your activism, we tend to shy away from the word Zionism. We tend to be somewhat embarrassed by the word because we've allowed other people to define what Zionism is for us. But we have to have a sense of pride in what this whole country and movement is all about. We need to strengthen ourselves in our Zionism. We need to talk about Zionism, about the fact that we should be proud of the nation that we've built. We're Jews, so we complain all the time. But we shouldn't when it comes to Israel. Yes, there's a lot of things that have to be fixed here. There's a lot of things, but that's our duty. That's our job. That's what it means to create a great nation. What a democracy is all about is noticing our flaws and improving on them. So here's my challenge to everybody. Instead of just reacting, let's be proactive. Let's rededicate ourselves to Zionism. Talk about Zionism in a positive way, in a way of pride, in a way where we sense, okay, 4,000 years ago, Abraham was the first Zionist. He was the one that came to the land and was given the dream of having a free people in the land, his descendants. The Jews of Egypt enslaved, what were they dreaming about? What was it that they, at nights, when they got back after back-breaking labor, what did they dream about? My grandfather, laying in his bunker in Auschwitz, if I could go to him and whisper in his ear, your great-grandchildren will grow up in a free Medinat Yisrael, a land of Judaism, of Zionism. Would he have ever believed that this dream had come true? But the dream isn't over yet. It's for us to strengthen and to grow it. Thank you very, very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Pilichowski. Our next speaker is formerly a commander in a paratroop combat. Raphael Cohen has more achievements than we have time to list. He has had prominent positions in the JNF emissary in Australia, the Beitar Youth Movement, and the community action centers. He has been involved in the World Likud, the Jewish Agency for Israel in North America, and many more. He is a true master of coordination and management, a huge proponent and enabler of Aliyah, fundraising, and event planning. Raphael has been a huge part of making this event happen, and I'm happy to invite him to the stage.
Shalom, guys. Good afternoon. Very happy that you're here. My name is Raphael Cohen. Since I was 20 years old, thanks God, I had the privilege to work with Zionism and to implement the way I believe in. I started years ago as a shaliach at the Jewish Agency and the JNF in Australia, in Sydney, Australia. For me, it was a shock about how to fulfill for Israeli. Most of the Israelis doesn't understand. For them, America, it's a Jersey garden, it's malls, it's shops. They don't know what is the meaning of living outside of Israel. It's opened my perspective about how our brothers and sisters living in a different perspective outside of Israel. And then I went to another shlichut. In between, I was the Beitar Youth Movement CEO, as the youth movement that's running here. And then I was World Likud CEO, which running also activities with Jewish communities, opening communities and working and building bridge between Israel and other communities. And then I have the second shlichut, which was on America. I lived in Teaneck, and I had the privilege for 3 years to work to run the Aliyah from North America to Israel. I had the privilege to bring here 6,000 Olim. And always I had some discussions with people about all the time. In my office, I was trying to ask people, why do you make this move? What was the moment? What was in common to all the answer I got was that in one moment, people were touched. Either it was in the youth movement, either it was in the shul. People were touched by something from Israel. And I was saying to people, it's going to be hard to compete with what America is sometimes providing you materially. But I definitely believe that regarding meaning, there is a lot that Israel can offer you. Regarding the meaning, regarding the content, regarding what you want to achieve in your life. And I do know that it's a big challenge for a lot of Americans that coming here. I do know that many times they are finding it very hard. Most of the time, Israelis will not be able to understand properly how it's to live outside of Israel. They're not going to understand the challenges when living in the diaspora. And many of the people who are living outside of Israel doesn't understand what is the meaning of living in Israel. I think that today we are facing big challenges with our relation in the Jewish diasporas all over, or worldwide. And I would like to speak about 2 or 3 of the challenges, just to put the focus. Today, by the way, I'm the director of Har Herzl, which I had the privilege to follow the way of a big dreamer of the Zionist movement, Theodor Herzl. And there are 1 million visitors a year in Har Herzl. Big majority of them are going to be high school students, primary school students, and soldiers. But when you're coming there, you realize basically everyone who's been buried there in Har Herzl is people who tried or wanted to do what's good for Am Israel. It doesn't matter which agenda they came, but they wanted to do something good for Am Israel. And you have a variety of all people from all kind of people who were in Israel. But what's have in common is they all give their lives, made their shlichut to work for Israel. So just to speak with you about 2 or 3 challenges that we are facing today. And I'm seeing that, unfortunately, in every trip I'm going to, mainly to the state, but I'm speaking about worldwide experience. The first thing is the language. In fact, less and less Jews speaking Hebrew worldwide. When you're going to South America, most of the time you're going to speak with a grandparent. You're going to speak with him Hebrew, with a fluent Hebrew. They will know what you're talking about. If you're going to go to the second generation, for the parents, they will be a little bit knowing Hebrew. They will understand some of it. When you're going to go to the third generation, you're going to realize they doesn't know English. They doesn't know Hebrew, sorry. So because the system was being different now, if the ESL, the second language in South American school, in Jewish South American schools, it was Hebrew. Today, the second language is English. It became a global word. Everyone wants to know English, which makes sense. But what's happened is that the Hebrew being pushed down and down. And Hebrew is not just a tool to speak. Hebrew is values. Hebrew is culture. Hebrew is, if you're a religious soul, it makes sometimes sense that you're going to understand what you're praying. But what I realized from my experience, most of the kids, I remember my kids when they went to Solomon Schechter, when I went to Shlichut, so their nephew here, like their cousins here, told them, did you become religious? They didn't understand when they were speaking over Skype, they didn't understand why they were wearing suddenly a kippah. I'm coming from Shoam, we're not a religious family, but we're traditional. And they went to Solomon Schechter, and they didn't understand that transfer that you're doing as a kid, because you're going to be, sometime what I find it, that if you're going to go to a Jewish day school, many times you're going to pray every day and you're not going to understand what you're saying. And the other way around in Israel, that you're not going to pray in most of the places. So probably there is a kind of golden path in between. But for sure, the Hebrew language is in a horrible situation in the diaspora. People who go into the synagogue do know it. But rather than that, most of the people will not understand what you're talking about. In the WZO, which I'm working in the last 6 years, we're working about building a lot of programs, virtual ulpans. I'm inviting you, I'm inviting your friends, I'm inviting your family outside of Israel to be part of it. We're trying to strengthen the power of Hebrew. language is not just a tool. Language is a way to communicate. Language is a way that I will be able to speak with you and to address my thoughts, and without the language, you cannot do it. Second challenge that we are facing is a big challenge of anti-Semitism. The WZO is an umbrella organization, and we have 13 departments, which every department is like, it's very similar to a minister. Like every head of department is a minister of issue, of a subject. So let's take, for example, the issue of fighting and combating anti-Semitism. You're going to have a head of department, and his job will be to have events, to run seminars, to raise awareness for anti-Semitism, to fight it as much as he can. So I'm going to give an example. When we went 2 years ago, before the Corona time, we went to Chile. Chile is one of the biggest Arab people who lived in Israel and moved outside. This is the biggest Palestinian community outside of Israel, 500,000 people. And of course, when you learn it, you realize that there is a correlation between. Okay, that's good. You realize that there is a correlation between the existence of the Palestinians groups in order the anti-Semitism. And we had their seminar, and the seminar was original. So you're bringing activists, 200 activists from all South America. They are coming in 3 days. You're trying to get them some tools, first of all, of awareness. Second, and brainstorming about what you can be done. We are facing horrible things that are happening in the universities worldwide. When you're going to the campuses in the state, what's going on there, it's really, it's unbelievable. The kids there who are sometimes your age, they're going to school, they have been attacked, literally, they have been attacked sometimes physically, and they don't know how to respond. They don't know what to say. And even sometimes they know what to say, they are feeling such weak minority that they don't know what to do. I realized many times when I went to Starbucks, I realized how many kids are changing their name when they're approaching to order coffee. And in a way, it makes sense that if your name is, I don't know, David is a good name, but if you have a very clear Hebrew name, you're sometimes going to change it to Michael or whatever, or something else, because it's actually part of losing your identity. It's the same thing with the Hebrew, that we are losing our identity. And that anti-Semitism, unfortunately, in the last 10 years, what we realize is that every year, all surveys are showing that, every year there are more and more violent incidents, which basically showing the numbers of the incidents are growing up. And one of the things that shocked me was that in most of the world today, let's say that you're a kid in Paris, you went to the shul and you came back and someone just told you a dirty Jew, or attacked you or throw a stone on you. So what we realized that most of the kids, 80% of the people who are being actually attacked will never going to be actually reporting the attack. 80%, think about it, guys. 80% of the people that have been attacked will never report about any official report. They will come, they will say to their dad, I've been attacked, someone called me dirty Jew. He will give them a hug and say, that's a price to be a Jew outside of Israel. People in France, people all over, it's a trend that's coming more and more popular, taking the mezuzah and putting it inside the house instead of having it outside of the house. That's something that we cannot ignore. We have to be aware. We have to be aware of that, and we have to strengthen our brothers and sisters. There is a big shift that happened. If in the 50s, Israel was relying on the diaspora, today Israel have to change our perspective. Israel is strong, is a country that's strong enough and have to support our brothers and sisters. Either it's giving them materials, information, awareness, helping them, anything that we can do. Our brothers and sisters decided, we're respecting that. They decided to live outside of Israel, but they're still our brothers and sisters. And we have to find a way to support them in any other way, because sometimes community is becoming weaker and weaker and smaller. And for me, the most bothering thing for me is that nearly 70% of the population in the state today is being defined as unaffiliated. Guys, this is a matter of generation, 2 generations, and I'm not coming here to scare you. I think this is the fact and this is the reality, and we have to look about the reality. Nearly 70% of the population in America is being defined as unaffiliated, which means they're not going to the shul, they're not supporting JNF, they are not part of any congregation, they're not part of community. In that way, it's their decision to make, but I think that we cannot give up. We have to fight for it. We have to find the ways. And I think that the best thing that we are doing in the National Institutes about it, say we cannot speak only about the hardcore issues such as advocacy, etc., etc. When you realize that, for example, if you're bringing a good chef from Israel, they're giving lectures, and people realize wherever they are that there is also a normal life in Israel, and they can bond with you about the professional level. I like to bike, I like to run marathons. When I'm meeting my colleagues that are running marathons, and we're having something in common, that's a different story. The story, your relation starting from that relation, from the professional level, from that perspective. Baruch haba, Rabbi Berg. So we're starting from a professional level, and that's, believe me, I think that's the best tip I can give to every advocate, to start from a professional level, to speak about our family, our hobbies, about those things, because the other things are much more harsh to deal. The third challenge I want to speak to you, and the last one, is going to be about assimilation. In a way, it's very connected to what I spoke about, the unaffiliated. We're talking about numbers of assimilation are getting more and more higher. Maybe it's not a surprise for you. I said that in the previous, when we said before, I was saying that for me it was shock. I was in the previous, like few years ago, I was working with Israelis in America. Believe it or not, just in New York, you have 250,000 Israelis. I'm talking about Israelis who left Israel and moved to live in the state. In all North America, you have around 1 million Israelis. All our leaders in the past, such as Rabbi, Sharon, they were calling them Yordim. And I thought I thought like in the last 10 years, I think it was not smart thing to do, because sometimes we're running in former Soviet Union about Jews, if they are Jews, if they are not Jews. Here you have 1 million people who are for sure Jews, and I want to hug them. I want to include them with my family, although they made a decision to go away right now. Because what we found, that the most assimilated group in North America is the kids of the Israelis. So when I'm just having a quick overview here, I'll see without too much research that most of you will define yourself Orthodox, modern Orthodox. I'm talking about the Israelis. Most of them will be secular. They're secular. They are not connected to shul. They are not connected to community. They doesn't have the culture of being part of synagogue. They are not part of something. So they are coming there. Usually they have less money, a little bit at the beginning at least. They're coming with relocation. They will set their kids for the public school because the schools are amazing in North America for public school. They find amazing schools. And then you realize that in the third year, you're going to start to celebrate the Halloween. In the fourth year, etc., etc. And then the kids will come with a girlfriend, which is someone from his class. So I don't hate anyone. I don't have anything against them. But I do believe that as a Jew, we have to work hard in order to keep our Judaism. Now, what's happening in that you're having less Hebrew, less identity, more chances for assimilation, and that's a big challenge for the Jewish people outside. I do think that the Israel job, the Israel state job, and mainly the National Institutes. The National Institute are 4 organizations. We're having the Jewish Agency, we're having the WZO, we're having the JNF, and we have Keren Yesod. All the idea of establishing them was when Herzl, Benjamin Zev Herzl, the first Zionist Congress, 1897, came and said, let's build connection to Am Yisrael. Let's start something. He was the first startupist for the Jewish people. He came with idea. He came with idea to start. Think about it. He wrote a book, Alt Noed. You don't have any case in the history that someone wrote a book, and from the book you're having a nation. I didn't find yet a similar case to that. From there, he took it 3 more steps. He created, in 1897, in the first Zionist Congress, he created the WZO. And all the other organizations were being built as a tool for the WZO. The WZO is the owner of the JNF. And the JNF job is to purchase land and to recycle water, etc., etc. What I'm saying is I'm calling you here to be involved with us, to come with creative idea. By the way, in the previous setting that we had, and now I'm seeing much more younger faces, and I love it, because worldwide we're having a problem in the Jewish communities. Most of the people who were involved became involved, and we left all the youngsters will be sometimes involved, and if they're going to be involved, they will be involved in the online platforms. It's important that we're going to meet. It's important that we're going to do. I'm challenging you to come to join us in any way. The ideas and the cleverness is with you. And I welcome you to come. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Thank you very much. טוב, I have the privilege, first of all, to call to חבר. Okay, can I, Rabbi Berg, חבר, באמת חבר. Rabbi Berg, Rabbi Stephen Berg, is the CEO of Aish Torah. Along that, he is also served on the board of the governors of the Jewish Agency as an executive board member of the Rabbinical Council of America. He was also the Eastern Director of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. He served as Managing Director of the Orthodox Union. Rabbi Berg also served as International Director of NCSY. A lot of jobs you had, huh? A lot of kol hakavod. I'm having the privilege, Rabbi Berg, please. How are you?
There are very few times I could be insulted by the term chaver, because we're brothers. We're not just friends. Raphael is really someone I've come to know and love over the last couple of years, working on all kinds of different projects with him. He's really one of the most terrific Jewish leaders out there. And I also want a big mazel tov to Ozzy, who I said to him I felt so bad. He actually got engaged 10 feet away from my office at Aish. I was walking out, and there's always an engagement. I call it the most romantic balcony in Jerusalem, because someone's always getting engaged up there. And I had no idea it was you. So I'm really excited now. I saw the pictures there on Facebook, and really congratulations to everyone that put this together from the beginning to end. I think it's a very, very needed topic. I think it's something we need to talk a lot more about. I was thinking about just now, I'm the CEO of Aish in the Old City, and we do every 5-6 weeks, we do a lunch with all the staff. You know, we have a lot of staff there, over 200 people, and we get together. And it was kind of talking about Rav Noach Weinberg, who founded Aish 45 years ago, and he passed away 11, 12 years. And it wasn't easy for us to come back from that and get a new leader and stuff. And, you know, and talking about anything amongst Jewish people, and certainly Zionism, you know, it had such an incredible start, but things change along the way. And we have to figure out how to change with it, and how to speak to a new generation, and how to really get those points out there. I just want to start a very, very brief Dvar Torah, something I was thinking about on my way here, because I think it was so appropriate for the young people that are here, because I was so inspired by them putting this together. And there's an amazing pasuk, you know, Jacob and Esav, Yaakov and Esav, right? They're coming back together, and everyone's getting ready for a war, right? They're getting ready for a war. And Yaakov has been living, you know, with Lavan and all kinds of evil, wicked people. And he says to him, he says, send a message to my brother that im Lavan garti, that I was living with Lavan. So Rashi, the famous commentator, says on the bottom that there was another message inherent. It wasn't just that I lived with Lavan. It was im Lavan garti, v'tayag mitzvah shamarti. Just you need to know that I was a diaspora Jew, and I was sitting with some of the most horrendous people, but I still was a Jew. And you need to know that I'm still that person. And if you think that God has given up on me, that's not the case. And what's interesting, I always thought about that, him kind of sending that message to Esav, and again, that early diaspora was a little different than today. But what's interesting was Yaakov is known as the man of dreams, right? The man of dreams. Like probably one of the most famous paintings anywhere you go is that ladder that goes up to heaven. Right, the famous dream. What was the famous dream he had? Right, the angels going up and down. That was Jacob's dream. Right, it's inspired so many people throughout the years. Was that his only dream? That was not his only dream. People forget about his second dream. The first dream was angels. The second dream was he was working for Lavan. He was in this place, right, where he was, getting cheated out of everything, etc. And he had a dream about spotted and speckled sheep, right? That Yaakov, you should go ask for the spotted sheep, the speckled sheep, and that's how he grew his wealth, right? He was dreaming about sheep. That was kind of money at the time, the gold bars of today, right? And what's amazing, what's that a rabbi pointed out to me, that when he went down all idealistic, when he went down, he was dreaming of angels. When he spent time in the diaspora with Lavan, he started dreaming of money. So it is true that they didn't take the Jewishness out of his heart, but it did affect him. And that's our challenge, I find so much in the world today, is everything, when you're a little kid, right? You're a little kid, you like to play, make believe, you like to dream, you like to think of impossible situations. And then you get older and they say, leave that behind, right? This is the real world, go get a job, right? It kind of kills the dreams. And Zionism was a dream. It was a crazy dream. When Herzl had the dream that we could come back here after 2,000, no one has ever done that. No one has ever come back from being kicked around by literally, you cannot pick a country in the world that didn't pick on us at one time or another. This crazy dream, this impossible dream to come back here to Israel. And he was right, and we were able to do it. Question is now, what are our next dreams now that we're here? Right? What are those next dreams? And therefore, I kind of wanted to start with just to say that I was so inspired by the young people, Ozzy reaching out to me, and he said he had a whole crew of young folks working on this. I was very inspired by that because we have to keep dreaming. Everyone will tell us it can't be, right? I was staying with Yaakov Chagoel, right? Last Shabbat, about 8-9 days ago. I'm sitting next to him at Shabbat. You can ask him this. I'm sure he'll quote it. And I said, can I tell you a story about Walt Disney? Right? Not exactly Shabbat conversation, but I told Yaakov, who is the head of the WZO, he's the acting chairman of the Jewish Agency. Just as I said, Raphael is my brother, Yaakov, the whole crew here. You guys are all my family. Just really amazing. I said, I have to tell you the following story about Walt Disney, right? You can ask him. He's coming after, right? Ask him if this is true. So I told him the following story, right? And this is what I really want you to remember. So Walt Disney, believe it or not, died before Disney World was built. He was alive for Disneyland in California, but he died before Disney World was built. So they went to his brother Roy, who was his partner in all these things. Walt was a creative genius. Roy made everything happen. And a reporter said the following thing to Roy. He said, Roy, isn't it terrible that your brother never had a chance to see this? And he said, no, you're wrong. He saw this, and that's why it's here. Right? The definition of dreaming and really dreams that come true is more vision. The definition of vision is being able to see things that other people can't see. Being able to see things that people think are crazy and then making them possible, right? That's the definition of vision, right? Dreams you could dream all day long, right? But dreams that come true, dreams that you follow up, dreams that you work so hard to implement, that honestly, that's like the mission statement of the Jewish people, right? And it all starts, and I want to just mention just for a couple different points, it all really starts with Abraham. Abraham starts off at basically saying, I'm going to start the Jewish people. And I'm going to set certain things in their DNA that are going to be important to them no matter what they do. And I'll just give you 2 or 3 points of that because I think they're so important to what we want to do and what really needs to drive Zionism. There is, if you go before the first portion of Lech Lecha, which of course, what's the first conversation God has with Abraham? He tells him to go to Israel, right? Literally before anything else. But even before that, there is a story of the Tower of Babel. You ever hear the story Tower of Babel? Right? The story of a big, big tower that they built to fight God. Right? They said, we're going to go after God, build a big tower, we're going to fight him. And there's a word there, achadim. It says there that they were unified, that they were together, right? Now, we're sitting here in the building of the WZO, the Jewish Agency, Kakal, right? I would venture to guess that almost every meeting, someone says, we just need achdut. We just need to all come together. We just need to be unified, right? That's a standard, right? We need to be unified. That's a standard thing we say in Judaism. So they had achdut, they were all together, and it was a total disaster. It was a total disaster, right? They tried to fight God, God got upset, spread them all around. What went wrong? How could achdut go so poorly? In my office in the old city, if you come by, I'm happy to show it to you. Well, you got engaged. You were there the other day. You'll come again, Ozzy, I'll show it to you. I've got 2 books sitting there. I'm probably the only person in the old city has these 2 books, okay? The first book is the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, right? And the second book is a book called Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. I ordered them one summer. I wanted to read them because, first of all, everyone talks about them, but very few people have actually read them. And I was curious to see what was inside. First of all, they're totally different books from each other. You know, you read the Communist Manifesto, you feel like you're being screamed at the entire book, right? You know, all these terrible rich people, we're going to go, we're going to take over, et cetera, right? The Mein Kampf is a totally different book. It's very seductive and horrible and scary, right? Adolf Hitler is the only book he ever wrote, and I wanted to like the Jews. I felt bad for the Jews, but then I started to see he slowly, you know, kind of pulls you in to why the Jews are terrible. But he doesn't just say I don't like them. He works his way there. Now, why do I want to read those 2 books? Those 2 books were responsible for more deaths in the last 2,000 years than any other book, right? Adolf Hitler killed 6 million Jews and tens of millions of others. And Karl Marx, and then later on Stalin, right? Stalin killed also tens of millions of people, right? Literally tens of millions of people killed for these 2 books. And what I realized about these 2 books was they spurned these societies that had tremendous achdut, right? They were unified. Communist Russia, every man, right? One man, one vote, we're all together. Nazi Germany, lockstep, literally, all together. They all had achdut. But it's clear from the books that it was achdut based on the things that they hate, not on the things that they love. And achdut that is built on hatred will always collapse eventually. It may take tens of millions of people with them like it did, but it will always collapse eventually. Avram Avinu sees that that's what's going on at the Tower of Babel. They get together, they bring everyone together to hate God. He says, I'm going to do things a little differently. He says, I'm going to bring together people that love God. And I'm going to build a religion based on love, a religion based on reaching out to people. And that's how he is so unbelievably successful, because he is the first person to understand that it's not based on what we hate. And if you go back, not only really changed, you go through Middle Ages in Europe, every 5 minutes, someone's going to war with someone else. Everyone hates everyone, right? But for Jews, our DNA is built differently. It's about love. And the most important thing that we have to do is we have to love each other. That's what makes you one nation. There's a beautiful, beautiful speech which was put into a book. It's called Kol Dodi Dofek, My Beloved is Knocking. It's a very famous speech that Rabbi Soloveitchik gave in 1956, 8 years after the creation of the state of Israel. Rabbi Soloveitchik gave this famous speech about what's going to be. I mean, we created the state, and now what, right? And he talks a lot about Shir Shirim, the Song of Songs, and he gives an unbelievable example there. He says that there's a parable. He says that there is a man with 2 heads, right? Man with 2 heads. And they're trying to decide, right, if this guy, his parents died, do you give him 2 portions because he has 2 heads, or 1 portion because they have 1 body? So they say, this is what we're going to do. Take a bucket of hot water, and they dump it over one of the heads. They said, if the other head feels the pain, then they're one entity. If the other head doesn't feel the pain, then they're 2 separate entities. Rabbi Soloveitchik said, for the Jews to be one nation, if the Jews in Buenos Aires are feeling pain, then the Jews of France have to feel it. And if the Jews of Israel are suffering, the Jews of America have to feel it. The only way we have been successful to be one nation is that we have always been there for each other. We have always been there for each other. There are so many, if you open up the Talmud, right? I did my master's in medieval Jewish history, and a lot of the things you go in there and you read the shilos and shuvos, the different questions and answers that rabbis got in the medieval times, and so many of them were about that they would kidnap or throw a Jew in prison and try to ransom him. Can you pay the ransom? Can you not pay the ransom, right? Why would they do that? Because the Jews are always going to save the Jews, right? Other nations, hey, take 1,000 people, who cares? I go to war for nothing and I lose 100,000 men. I don't care. But for the Jews, I always said, I'm a child of Mosheva, right? I grew up in Bnei Akiva. I grew up in Mosheva. So I would tell you that every single summer, come Tisha B'Av and many other days throughout the summer, we watch Raid on Entebbe. I've probably seen Raid on Entebbe about 1,000 times, right? That's the go-to, if you grew up in Mosheva, movie. But no matter how many times I always watched that movie, there was one scene that always moved me. It still does till today. I get goosebumps. You know, they're training. Everyone knows the famous story. Air France plane was hijacked to Uganda, and they have to go to save them. And then, right, the IDF decides they're going to go. And then Yoni Netanyahu, Olav Shalom, right, Zecher Tzadok Levracha, the former prime minister's brother, who's the only soldier that was killed in the mission, he starts to give a speech, right? Right before that, he gives a speech. And he says, you're probably wondering why we're going halfway around the world to rescue these people from an Air France jet. It wasn't El Al, right? According to the way nations work, right? They're not responsible. Like, why are we going to get these people? Well, he said, we're going to get them because they're Jews. And if we don't save the Jews, who else is going to do that? There's a famous speech that Menachem Begin gave when there was a huge Holocaust reunion. People in the early 80s, in 81, people hadn't seen each other in many, many years. They were at the Kotel, and it was one of those last chances for a lot of people to come together. And that was when they bombed the nuclear power plant in Iraq. Menachem Begin got up at the Kotel. I mean, that's why I look at it all the time. There's no better backdrop for a dramatic speech like that. And Menachem Begin gets up and says, you know, if Jews are threatened, we're not gonna stand for it anymore, right? That is so much of what Zionism is built on. There is a land here, right? And I do believe it's holy. I'm Jewish. I believe God kind of said that's where you should be. But it's not just about the land. It's about the people and what we do with it, and more importantly, what we do for each other. What we do for each other. And we can't ever forget that. I used to talk, I won't go on and on, but I used to work for the Simon Wiesenthal Center, as you heard, and I used to talk a lot about genocide, right? And there's a lot to be said there about the fact that genocide is a crime against humanity, but it's totally unenforceable. Samantha Powers wrote a book about this, right? If you right now got on your phone that there was a massacre going on somewhere in the world, who would go in to save them? We had Bill Clinton come speak for us, and they asked him when he was speaking for the Simon Wiesenthal Center what his biggest regret was when he was president. He said Rwanda. 800,000 people were massacred in 3 months. He says, we couldn't have saved 800, but we could have saved 300. He said, but no one knew what to do because who's supposed to go save them, right? So a couple of years ago, when I was working at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, I told a story about a mayor that was out jogging of the second largest city in the Ukraine, right? It was back when Russia and Ukraine were playing footsie with their soldiers. Now it seems like it's probably happening again. And the mayor's out jogging, second largest city in Ukraine. Guess what? He gets shot in the back. What happens to him? Well, as I like to say, he won the DNA lottery. Turns out he's Jewish. Within 24 hours, he's in Israel in a hospital, and he gets better. We go get our Jews. We take care of our Jews. We have to be brothers and sisters. It's what makes all of this possible. But we have to focus on what unites us. And this, I want to quote a good friend of mine, Danny Danone, who I think is an absolutely terrific guy. I knew him when he was the UN ambassador. I thought he did a great job. I think Gilad Erdan's doing a great job. I think we've been very lucky. The last few guys we've had in the UN's an impossible assignment. So, the guys that get there and, can duke it out a little bit, I have a lot of respect for them. They're great. I remember Danny Danone used to come with UN ambassadors. He would come to Aish every year. And, they would come and they would speak. We'd show them everything. We'd sit there. I said, Danny, I saw you just gave a speech. And Danny, in the middle of the speech, pulls out a Tanakh, right, a Bible. And he starts to quote from the beginning of the Bible, I was like, Danny, that was awesome. He says, I'll tell you, Steve, My friends in Israel thought I went crazy. They're like, "Man, like you came this like rabbi, like like what in the Bible?" And he says to me, he says, "Without this, where's our right to? Where it all goes back to this." And there's a struggle. And this is not our topic, but this is a topic that needs looking into. I'm come from North America, do a lot of work there. A lot of Israelis are in North America. Some estimates are up to 500,000 Israelis in North America. And Israelis that spend up to 10 years, this is the IAC, just did a study. Israelis that spend up to 10 years in America, I think is a 17% intermarriage rate, right? How do we keep people here? And I'll just tell you something else. This I haven't spoken about this a lot. I've thought about this a lot. I wanted to write an op-ed about this. But even COVID was a real challenge for North America versus Israel. I don't know that everyone fully understood it. But I believe in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a bit of a missed opportunity. The beginning of the pandemic, the Jews in New York and New Jersey were doing really, really badly. Right? I will tell you that on my block, I had 4 friends who sat Shiva for parents, and it was really bad. And Israel was doing really good in the beginning. Now, we all know everything seesawed as time went on. But I remember saying to friends of mine who were, elected officials, other ones saying, now's your chance to send some sympathy back to America. Right? Every time there's a terrorist attack, today there was a shooting in the old city. My phone's blowing up from people from America, we're with you, There was a moment where Israel could have been, we're with you, and it was very quiet. And it was almost a little bit like, Israel, we know really should be here because we know how to deal with it. And then it went on. But even more than that, the coming and going into Israel was very complex and complicated, right? And Israel, and this really goes to the heart of Zionism. Are we a state like everyone else, or is there a point where we have to look after our Jews? Right? I'll just tell you for myself personally, I lost my father a few months ago. And we had to get the amount of work we had to do to get him buried here in Israel. He was in the process of making Aliyah. He'd been a rabbi of the synagogue for 45 years. They have an apartment in Ramat Beit Shemesh. They had bought plots, right? The amount that we had to go through to get him to be buried here was extremely difficult on my mother. And I understand there's a bureaucracy, and I understand how government works, and I run a very, very large amutah here. That's not lost on me. But are the Jews of the world your brothers and sisters or not? When it comes to getting buried, that people are, right? Should you maybe make a drop more effort? The good friends of mine with one of the deputy mayors, and they said to him, oh, great, Croatia's green. We can now have them come. But all the Jews in North America couldn't come. It was very painful. That's a real issue. How do we address that issue? Right? If someone's not a citizen of Israel, does that make them a traitor? Right? Because everyone should be here. Many times you hear people come out with an aliyah of you should be here. Oh, there was an anti-Semitic attack in New York. Oh, you should have been in Israel. Right? Is that really the way to do it? Right? I'm not saying anything you don't know. We've all had these conversations. Or do we want to act like Avram viewed out of love and realize that we're all Jews and we just got to do the best no matter what? We have to kill ourselves to cut through the bureaucracy, to make everyone feel welcome, to try and bring people in. I spoke to a group of Israeli soldiers. I always tell the story to them. And to this day, I don't think I've met an Israeli soldier that knows the story that I'm going to tell you, but you might because you're from North America. So I told the story of the creation of the state of Israel, right? The creation of the state of Israel, the American government was totally against the creation of the state of Israel, right? Secretary of State Marshall said to President Truman, if you recognize the state of Israel, I won't vote for you in the next election, right? The Defense Department was everyone was against it. And they wanted to get Chaim Weizmann in to speak to Truman, but they couldn't get in the front door. It's not like today where you have the White House Hanukkah party and everyone's going over for latkes, right? Back then, it wasn't like that. So they don't know how to get in the front door. Try. Finally, they realize that there's a Jew in Missouri named Eddie Jacobson, right? Who is Eddie Jacobson? Eddie Jacobson fought in World War I, and he had a best friend in the Army. Who was his best friend? Harry Truman. Truman was his best friend. They opened up a business afterwards. It went bankrupt, but they were still very, very good friends. So they locate him, and they say, look, we want to get Chaim Weizmann in the front door. Eddie, can you come help us? I'm there. Wasn't a particularly connected, affiliated Jew. Right? But so he goes meet with Harry. You can go on YouTube and watch either Harry Truman or Eddie Jacobson telling the story. You don't have to believe me. It's the most incredible thing to watch them tell the story. Anyway, Eddie Jacobson comes in there and they're schmoozing. How's your family? Back there, we're old friends. And he says, Harry, you know, I've never asked you for anything. He says, you're right. You're the only one that hasn't asked me for anything. He says, I know that you have heroes. And there was a picture of Andrew Jackson there, one of Harry Truman's. I know Andrew Jackson's your hero. I have heroes too. Dr. Chaim Weizmann is one of my heroes. Harry, I want you to meet with him. What does Harry do? First, he curses him out. You come in, everyone's driving me crazy. I can't take it. He goes, fine, you bring him in the back door tomorrow. He said, but if anyone, the press gets wind of it, it's off. He says, you got it. Brings him in the next day, and he's very moved by the meeting. He decides he's going to recognize the state of Israel. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens when we declare a state. It's unbelievable, the ability of a guy like Eddie Jacobson, right? A little Jew from Missouri, to go out there and step forward. Well, I'm sure everyone, you have all the pundits saying, no, that's not the way to approach, right? He just got it done. Now, what's amazing, there's a postscript to the story. A lot of people don't know. There's a famous interaction between Queen Esther and Mordecai in the Purim story, right? When Mordecai says to Esther, I need you to go, in there to Ahasuerus to save the Jewish people. What does she say? You out of your mind? You know what he did to his last wife? He chopped her head off. You crazy? He says, you have to go in. He says, so God's going to save the Jewish people, and if not with you, it'll be someone else. But he says, perhaps this is why you were put in this place. Perhaps that's why God put you there. Postscript to the Harry Truman story, the chief rabbi of Israel goes to bring him a little Sefer Torah as a thank you. And he gives it to him, and he says, Mr. President, perhaps God placed you in your mother's womb so you could help the Jewish people. And there's an aide there watching this, and he says, it sounds a little over the top to him, a little bit much. He looks at the president's crying. He says the same thing that Mordecai tells Esther, he tells President Truman. I want to close with a story. This story I tell times one of my favorite stories in the world, but I think it's, we're mixing this, and Zionism for me always sprouts from religious Zionism. This is what I was talking about before. Without the Bible and without this passionate connection of our Jewish history, right, and Jewish learning and wisdom, right, that's what makes Israel Israel. There's an amazing story of a fellow by the name of Avigdor Kalani. Avigdor Kalani was one of the heroes of the Yom Kippur War, right? There was a point in time where I became obsessed with the Yom Kippur War. I read I probably read 15 books on the Yom Kippur War. What I was obsessed with was a little different. I was obsessed at the infighting in the government while it was going on. There are a lot of interesting things. But the one thing that I kept seeing over and over and over again was this name, Avigdor Kalani, right? And they called him the hero of Israel. Avigdor Kalani is the guy in the tank that stood his ground, right, and defended the state of Israel, right? And so I'd read all these books, and I found out that he had a job. He was working the Kiryah. He was some job there. And I think I was with the OU at the time, and we got to go to the Kiryah, and I said, I got to meet Avigdor Kalani. I don't care what else we do. I got to meet this guy. This guy is the greatest hero of the idea of history. So we go there, and I meet him, and it's one of these. He's a very, very happy, go-lucky, besimcha guy. And we're schmoozing, and it's the type of thing that he starts a sentence. I'm finishing everything. I know everything. I know everything about this. I've read everything about this guy, right? We're talking. I even know why a Taimani guy is named Avigdor, which is European, right? It's because there was a Gabbai in the show. I know everything, right? There's a long story and everything. The guy is unbelievable. So I said, there's one question I have to ask you. Right? And, as the story goes, right, he was at the bottom of the ridge. There's a place called Emek HaBacha. They renamed it later because so many Jewish boys were killed there, right? So he's at the bottom of the ridge of Emek HaBacha, and he's starting to give the guys. He's like, look, we got to go to the top. There's a good chance we're going to get killed. They have hundreds of tanks. We have almost nobody here, but we got to go. We got to do it. Goes to the top, and guess what? Looks his right and left. No one else went with him. He went back down. He gave him another talk. He said, this is it. Sfat and Tver is at our back. Goes to the top. Sits there all night, defends the Jewish people, right? And in the morning, they call him the hero of Israel because he held that ridge. He held that ridge overnight. And I said to him, I have to ask you this one question. In the story that I read about you, right? The story I read about you. So it said that when he went into the army, his father told him, you could do whatever you want, just don't go into tanks. right? His father's job had been, when people got killed in a tank, to bring out the body. Psychologically, his dad couldn't deal with it. You can do whatever you want. Just don't go into tanks. He says, no, that's okay. I'm going to be a pilot. It's no problem. He goes to be a pilot. Guess what? He doesn't have hearing in one of his ears. Gets kicked out of the Air Force. But that's okay, because he's going to be an infantry soldier, right? A foot soldier, right? Goes to the infantry. Guess what? He's got flat feet. Gets kicked out of the infantry. Poor guy tries to get into every single part of the army, right? And there's only one brigade willing to take him. Guess what? Tanks. And I said to Victor, Victor, it seems to me that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that God wanted you in that tank, during Yom Kippur, and that's why you had such a problem getting to all the, he said, Tatzodek, he agreed with me. He said, you're right. And I always tell over that story, and I'll tell you why I tell that story, and I think it's so powerful, is because there's no doubt in my mind, as a believing Jew and believing that God plays a role in my life, I believe that God placed him in that tank to help the Jewish people. But what is so important to know, God did not make him go up that ridge. That was his choice. That was his courage. Many times we get put in situations. We're here in Israel. This is amazing. I mean, 100 years ago, maybe they had a dream about it, but they certainly didn't know it would be a reality. 200 years ago, forget about it. 300 years ago, 400, we're here now. God placed us here now to get certain things done. We're not done. We're not done. A lot of Jews are leaving this country. Not enough Jews are coming to this country, right? We're still dealing with issues all over the place. Anti-Semitism is rampant. There are people out there hiding behind BDS, right? Attacking Israel. There are people attacking circumcision, trying to ban it in Europe. They're banning ritual slaughter of kosher meat. People are attacking us all over the place. It is not simple for us. But God put us here to get something done. God put us here. This, I believe, maybe others don't, I believe that this is it. This is what all the prophets were told. We're back in Israel, right? And they could try and kick us out all they want. We're not going anywhere this time. We're not. But the question is, qualitatively, how do we grow? How do we build? What's the character's nature of this nation look like? Those things are important. We're back, and we're back because people in this building got us back. People that had dreams got us back. But now it's time for us to pick up the baton and to move forward and to make sure that the land of Israel is strong and the nation of Israel is strong. Thank you.
We'll be here in 12 to 15 minutes. So, Rabbi Berg, I'm always impressed by your stories. I'm having more and more stories. Toda Rabbi. It was really, really, really strengthening. Toda. To the friendship, for the, you say, family. We are family, Baruch Hashem. So we are heading toward the last stage of the day. And I have the privilege here to call to those two young activist students that actually initiate the whole day. And I'm assuming you know them, but I'm going to present them very briefly. Moshe Schwarzberg. Moshe Schwarzberg is a true Zionist. All the way through school, early on in his life, he wanted to make a change and to protect people. A huge inspiration in his life was for Ari Fold, Zichrono Livracha, who taught him constantly to be vigilant and constantly ready work for Israel. Moshe and Zvi and Azi decided in the 11th grade to work on a podcast to respond a barrage to rocket from Hamas, and have since constantly worked to combat anti-Semitism. And his partner, Azi Fine, I'm going to say in the last opportunity, Mazal Tov la Azi. Azi Fine is soon going into the army, where he's searching to excel. Azi has never been one on the back down from a fight for what is right, and he will certainly not back down from defending his country. Azi is currently in Mechina in Judea, where he prepares diligently for his draft. He started the podcast along with Moshe. He came up with the idea for this event, as well as driving us both to do it. This event is Azi creation, and doubtless is deserved credit for it. Azi is committed and has been for years to fighting hate. So just one last word. I will say that, guys, it's not clear. I'm working 20 years. Thanks God, I'm always having the privilege to work with youngsters, and I believe my position is to allow them. So I really, really saluting you both. I'm willing that the most important thing will be the follow-up that we'll do on the day after with approaching more people, and we are going to work together for what we believe in. Please, guys.
I'd also like to point out that, in your words, if you knew we were 19 when we started, you would have run this very differently. Well, that's what he didn't tell you. Yeah, and? Okay, so I got a few words that I want to say, and hopefully Ozzy will say after me. I think we can all agree that anti-Semitism is on the rise. If we don't, we'll talk about that after, but let's just go with everyone agrees on that. I want to quote Herzl for a second, and then we'll move on. He writes in his book, A Jewish State, its, as in anti-Semitism, its cause is our excessive production of mediocre intellects. Beside the fact that mediocre intellects are just fun to say, it's also important. Because what he's saying is that we have too many people who don't really know what we're doing. The average person, if he encounters some sort of anti-Semitism online, in person, he won't really know how to interact with it, which we will be working on that right after this. But that is really important. And I think the reason why it's a lot harder to be fighting against anti-Semitism compared to being anti-Semitic is we need to do our research. Let's take an example. A little over a year ago, there was an explosion in Beirut. What happened there was devastating, and it took several hours for our side of the story to really have any information to talk about it. Within a matter of hours, probably even less, the social media platforms, everything was filled with videos and posts proving that Israel did it, with the missiles coming from all directions, showing that Israel blew up this place. When we couldn't really do much, prove that it wasn't us, because we didn't know the actual facts. So I think the most important thing is to start off with knowing your research, knowing the other side better than they know themselves. Another thing which I'll explain the definition for first is what's called the echo chamber. In short, the echo chamber is an online term for social media's way of keeping you on their platform. What they do is they only show you what you want to see. They only show you the facts and the information that will keep you on their platform. Because the second they show you something that doesn't align with your views, you'll get annoyed and you'll leave. So they do is they create basically an echo chamber where all you hear is what you want to hear, and then you keep scrolling, which is another thing we need to deal with. Because as of now, we post on Instagram, we post on Twitter, a great video, it gets 1,000 views, cool. But the average person in America and anywhere who doesn't really engage with this world won't actually see it, because they're stuck in their chamber. The third and most important thing, which Ozzy and I have said this a million times on the podcast, is speak up and share. Where most people are too scared to actually say something on social media, to actually speak up if it's for they're scared about their job or how they'll be looked by in society or whatever the reason is. Too many people are scared to actually speak up. So three things that we need to do is we need to know how to research. We need to get to the people who aren't really looking for us, and we need to just do it. We need to just talk and share. Ozzy, your turn.
Yeah, I did not have that much time to prepare. I got a little busy. I wanted to leave here the event knowing that everyone got something out of it. So I don't want to bore you with facts and everything, but I do want to bring up three important things. The first is that there's a reason that the Jewish people are fighting for Israel and not Uganda, Africa, or anywhere else. There's a reason the Jewish people are have never fully left the land, and there's a reason why the Jewish people feel a spiritual connection to the land of Israel. When we can understand this, it will answer the question as to why we're still here today. Yeah, by the way, I'm reading from this because I had no time to prepare. Why we haven't given up, and why we are still fighting so hard that our soldiers are risking their lives on the front lines for this tiny piece of land. This is bigger than freedom in America. This is family reuniting and coming back home. Unfortunately, the war is not over only the land. Colleges across America are pulling pro-Israel programs. Jews in America are being physically abused in the streets and all over the world, and Holocaust memorials are being vandalized. The list goes on. I'm no mind reader, but I can guarantee that everyone here who heard that list felt something, whether it's anger, shock, outrage. That is because you feel connected. Everyone here is a Jew and Israeli. You may not know the lady who got smacked in the street or been to the shul that was set on fire, but you feel a connection. Each and every one of you has the power to stand up for Jews around the world and make Israel a safer place. Do your homework, do your research, know your identity. From there, you'll figure out the next step. Don't stay back and stay quiet. Speak up and share.
Let's take 5 minutes. We'll wait for Yaakov to go, and then we'll keep going.
אני אתרגם אותך, למה לא באנגלית? אתה עושה בעברית עשה? כולם ידעו באנגלית, שאתה רוצה. טוב. חברים, את החלק האחרון, ככה לסיכום של היום, נמצא איתנו יעקב חגואל. יעקב חגואל הוא יושב ראש ההסתדרות הציונית, למעשה הבניין שאנחנו נמצאים בו זה הבניין של ההסתדרות הציונית. יעקב חגואל הוא יושב ראש ההסתדרות הציונית, וגם יושב ראש בפועל של הסוכנות היהודית, Jewish Agency. יעקב בעברו היה מנכ"ל של תנועת בית"ר עולמי, מנכ"ל וגזבר של תנועת בית"ר עולמי, והיה יושב ראש הליכוד העולמי. מקדיש את כל חייו ואת היום יום שלו לעשייה ציונית, לקירוב לבבות בארץ ובתפוצות, ויש לי את הכבוד לקרוא לו, לתת לנו ככה את הסיכום של היום.
תודה רבה רפאל. אמרו לי שני מיקרופונים. אמרו לי שנהניתם פה היום בסך הכל, זה נכון? היה בסדר? מצוין. דיברתם על החדר הזה רפאל? מצוין. תראו, אני מאוד שמח שאני עומד פה מול אנשים שהם אקטיביסטים. זה לא דבר שהוא פשוט היום. העברית בסדר? כן? אוקיי. ואני מאוד שמח שיש אנשים, אתם לא היחידים ברוך השם, שעם ישראל ומדינת ישראל חשובים להם, ואני רוצה בראש ובראשונה להודות לכם על העשייה שלכם, על העבודה שלכם ברשתות החברתיות, שזו זירה היום שהיא זירה לא פשוטה, בטח היום אחרי הפיגוע שהיה פה הבוקר, צריך לתת תגובה חשובה גם ברשתות החברתיות, ואני יודע שדיברתם פה על וולט דיסני, ודיברתם פה על הרצל, ודיברתם פה על הרבה חלומות, ואני רוצה לשתף אתכם, אני מקווה שעל זה לא דיברתם, על הבניין הזה. הבניין הזה הוא חלום. למה הוא חלום? תראו איזה עוצמה יש לאנשים שמאמינים, מאמינים בצדקת הדרך. ב-1929, רק שנתיים אחרי שהבריטים קיבלו פה את המנדט על הארץ, יש פה מיליוני ערבים, עשרות אלפי יהודים, והסוכנות היהודית וההסתדרות הציונית מקבלים החלטה אמיצה שאומרת, שימו לב, השנה 1929, אנחנו יוצאים למכרז להקים פה בניין גדול, שהוא יהיה הבניין של הממשלה שבדרך. אנחנו נמצאים ערב השואה הארורה שלא ידעו עליה, ואנשים משקיעים המון כסף ברכישת הקרקע כאן, ובבנייה של 3 בניינים מחוברים שיש כאן, והבניינים האלה הוקמו במדורג בשנות ה-30, וזה אנשים ששמו כסף, אספו כסף, ואמרו הנה, אוטוטו יש לנו מדינה. אוטוטו, מה שקרה בקונגרס הציוני הראשון, ואחרי זה הצהרת בלפור, ואחרי זה הצהרת בלפור, כן, בא ויצר תחושה שהולכים להגשים את החלום הציוני אחרי 2000 שנות גלות. אותו חלום שהסבים והסבתות שלנו חלמו והתפללו אליו 3 פעמים ביום. אותו חלום שבנימין זאב הרצל הצית בלהבות של הסבים והסבתות שלנו, שרובם דרך אגב היו נגדו. רוב העם בהתחלה אמר, מה זה המשיגינה הזה? אנחנו לא שם. אבל אותו חלום שהאיש הזה חלם ויצר פלטפורמה, הקים את ההסתדרות הציונית העולמית בקונגרס הציוני הראשון, כדי להיות פלטפורמה שתקים את מדינת ישראל, אותם אנשים שהמשיכו לחלום איתו ביחד, ולאחר שהוא נפטר, אותה הנהלה של ההסתדרות הציונית העולמית החליטה על הקמת המבנה הזה, להיות הממשלה שבדרך. וכמו שהסבירו לכם, פה הושבע נשיאה הראשון של המדינה בחדר הזה. במשרד שאני יושב פיזית, ישב בן גוריון כראש הממשלה הראשון של מדינת ישראל מ-1948 עד 1962, הוא ישב במשרד שאני יושב בו היום. ואני אומר לכם, אם זה לא חלום, ואם זה לא הגשמה של חלומות, ואם זה לא אמונה בצדקת הדרך, אני לא מכיר מה זה אמונה בצדקת הדרך. והיום, שיש לנו מדינה מדהימה, שהחלק, הריכוז הגדול של היהודים נמצא היום במדינת ישראל, רוב היהודים עוד לא נמצאים במדינת ישראל, אבל הריכוז הגדול נמצא כאן ברוך השם. יש לנו את הסיבות להמשיך להאמין בצדקת הדרך שלנו, ולהמשיך לעשות טוב למען מדינת ישראל ולמען עם ישראל. ואני שוב רוצה להודות לכם על העשייה הברוכה שלכם, ואני מקווה שהיום הזה נתן לכם כלים ונתן לכם רוח גבית להמשיך לעשות את העשייה החשובה שלכם. תודה רבה וישר כוח גדול. שאלות או ש... shoot. In English it's good. It's good. אוקיי. תודה רבה חברים. חנוכה שמח.
So I'm going to try and follow Chagoel, which is not going to be easy. Ozzy and Moshe have been talking for a long time today about asking questions and doing research, and we're going to be talking right now about projects and things that everyone can do in order to further the cause of Zionism and what we believe in. And the first thing I want to talk about, as the first project that we're talking about, Ozzy and Moshe will follow me, but I want to talk about first of all questions. I found it true that most people don't actually ask questions about their own things. They often have a belief that they start with, and they stick to it, regardless of what comes up. And anything that they see that opposes it, they label it as something. They label it as discriminatory, as evil, or as hate speech, as blasphemy, or as something that they disagree with, something bad in and of itself, and so they don't actually have to confront it. Some people instead, they often they see it and they're like, that's a good point, and they sort of interact with it, but they don't actually question anything. I'm not accusing anyone. Of course, I've done it myself many times and do it. Everyone does it. But I think it's important to ask questions about what you believe in and to check things, so you won't fall into the trap of, say, hate accidentally. One of the previous speakers, I don't remember exactly who spoke about. Yeah, it was Segal. She spoke about how it is that they fall into this trap of anti-Zionism without actually having any hate in their heart. And they do hateful things and they say things that actually hurt people without actually meaning to. And I think, personally, it's because they don't question things and they don't look into things. It's fair enough. It's pretty difficult to sometimes. So it's important, in my opinion, to ask questions. There's an old metaphor brought by Rabbi Sachs in one of his books and by Chachamim in the Gemara, talking about the difference between a good potter and a bad potter. So someone who works with clay, a good person who works with clay, someone who knows what they're doing, they walk around their shop and they hit the clay with a metal rod to show, my clay is good. Whereas a bad potter, someone who doesn't make very good pots, walks around and they gently say, don't touch, don't touch, don't touch, don't touch. And obviously there's a difference between different pots, but the point is that's how you should be treating your beliefs. You shouldn't take a look at them, don't challenge that, don't do anything that could, make me think about it. No, you have to go around and you have to hit it. You have to ask questions about what you believe. You have to challenge your premises. If you believe something, ask why. Check yourself, why do you believe this? What's the basis for this? One really important way to do this is you talk to other people who disagree with you. You don't go over to it and you think for a second, you look at it, yep, seems right. No, you go over to other people and you try and figure out why other people disagree with you. You don't go over to it and you look up things to do that, because you can just find a website, imright.com, and then you spit in your opinion and it will tell you everything that you want to know. No, you look to other people who disagree with you. You read what they say. You listen to them. You try to argue against yourself. You don't just listen to them and then argue against them. You argue against yourself, because an argument isn't supposed to be you versus the other person. It's not you against them and, I have my belief, he has his belief, and so I have to try and prove him wrong. No, it's you and the other person versus the question. You're trying to figure out what's true. Because if you convince him of something that's wrong, it's not helpful to anyone. It doesn't improve anything. Your goal in any discussion should not be to disprove the other person, to humiliate them, to do anything like that. Your goal is supposed to be to try and find who's right. And it's you and the other person versus the question. You don't just look for evidence to support your claim, you look for evidence to support the other side's too. You try and figure out the truth. All of this can be summed up in one phrase that my dad used to tell me every time that I went to school. He didn't say, listen, he didn't tell me, come back and tell me what you learned. He told me to ask good questions. And I think that that's the most important thing to do. Thank you, guys.
All right, I got my call to action, and then Ozzy's going to sum everything up. We said we'll be here until 4:30, but our speakers came early, which was good. So we can finish early unless we decide to keep you here for the extra hour. So the Shraga spoke about how to do research and how to ask the questions, but what do you do when you start engaging? So there are two very important rules that I learned the hard way. The first one is be nice and don't curse. When I first started fighting anti-Semitism on Twitter, I got really annoyed, as happens when you're on Twitter, and I cursed at someone. Within 20 seconds, I got a tweet back to me saying, "Oh, you Jews don't know what to say. All you do is curse." From that moment, I have never cursed online at someone since. I realized that was way too specific. But what I have done is when I get curses at, I don't say, "Oh, you don't know what to say." I generally just send, Israeli flags and a lot of kissing emojis, because that really pisses them off. The other thing, which is also really important, I said it before, is very simple. Do your research. It's the most fundamental thing. And Rudy Rachman, who sadly was not able to come here today because he was in the U.S., but Ozzy and I, back in early days of Within Zionism, were on a webinar with Rudy. and they happened to unmute us by accident, so we were able to ask a question. And we asked him, what would you tell to two activists who are starting off? And it was very simple. Know your enemy better than they know themselves. And that is something that we've worked very hard to do, because we didn't learn very well in high school. But since then, we've known our history very, very well. Ozzy.
So just a few closing words. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming and anyone on the YouTube Live. It was great. This morning, from 9 o'clock till I think we finished at like 12:30, we had a roundtable discussion with about 20 activists. They're usually, most of them are active on like social media. They all have different projects. Some are from different organizations, Rabbi, the Israel Innovation Fund, and a bunch of others. And it was a lot of fun. There was a bunch of arguments, disagreements. And then we worked on projects together. We talked about how we can work together in the future. And we got a lot out of it. It was very inspiring, and I'm very, very proud to be a part of it. Thank you to our speakers. They were all incredible. Hope you got something from them. And that's pretty much it. This is the future of Zionism, and you're all part of it.